Let's talk about the do's and don'ts when it comes to the Robinson curriculum reading component. Hi there, my name is Karen, and if you're new here, please consider subscribing if you'd like to go from questions to confidence when it comes to the Robinson curriculum. I'm here to answer questions, and I've got my list here of do's and don'ts that I picked out from the RC course of study. The RC course of study really is a gem, and I highly recommend that you sit down and read it. I think it's worth the price of the curriculum alone. Just reading that, it's really hard. I don't think you can really piece it together correctly on your own. You need to get the big picture, the why as well as the how and the what, all of it. So I went through the course of study and picked out the biggest do's and don'ts when it comes to the reading component, but I'm sure I missed some things, so you might, obviously go back and reread it. But let's hit the main highlights here of the do's and the don'ts. The reading component part of RC is one of the biggest reasons why I was drawn to it, because I love books. I value reading because it's a great vehicle to learn something new, right? So I value books, I value learning, reading, and I wanted to pass that value on to my kids. And so some of the best ways to do that is, one, model it by example. And I really do try to do that. In fact, it's almost getting a little bit ridiculous. Books are just overtaking the house. Books have overtaken my closet. I have very little real estate space there, and it's being consumed by books. And it's funny because kids really do learn by example. So now it's trickling down to my children. For example, my son, he has his own library in his room, and he even created library cards for his siblings. So if they want to check out one of his books, they have to present the library card. And it's funny because sometimes they lose it, and he charges 10 cents for him to create them a new library card. It's a lot of fun. Obviously, that's one way, just leading by example. And number two, I wanted to pick a curriculum that also had those same values, which enter in the Robinson curriculum. So let's just jump right in. Do have them read the RC book list, obviously between generally the ages of 6 to 18. Do have them start at the beginning and go down in order of difficulty. Now I have the book list printed here. I print one for each student. They write their name on top, and then we record when they start and when they finish the book. So it goes in order of difficulty, very easy. Book number 1 is the McGuffey's Primer, all the way to book number 157, which is De Bello Gallico by Julius Caesar. So it goes in order of difficulty. Do have them start in the beginning and just continue to go down the list. Now it does say that, some skipping around is okay, but in general, do go in order. Don't, however, attempt too many books above their reading level. So if they're maybe a voracious reader and they're really reading really quickly and they're starting to get into really difficult books above their reading level, slow down, use some books from the additional reading section. There's a long list of great books that are meant to be read in those first 2 years of reading that can kind of slow them down before they get into more difficult books. So don't attempt too many books above their reading level, and also don't skip books unless they're too old for them. So for example, if you have a 13-year-old, 14-year-old that you're transitioning over to RC, you wouldn't obviously have them read the McGuffey's Primer or Nursery Rhymes or the Tale of Solomon Owl. So obviously don't skip books unless they're too old for them. Also, another don't, and I think a lot of parents make this mistake, don't think that this is the only reading that they're supposed to do. No. This is in addition to supplemental reading, or maybe they get on a kick with a certain author they really like and read all of their books, and also things like encyclopedias. So it's not that this is the only thing that they're reading. No. This is in addition. This is their formal academic reading that has, all the various subjects, but they should, of course, read for several hours a day of just books for their own enjoyment. Again, books from authors that they enjoy, and like the encyclopedia. For example, we have the Book of Knowledge series. We love that, and just other books as well that are just kind of like an encyclopedia. So do encourage your children to read for several hours, especially during the first 2 years of reading, because they need a lot of practice and you want to get them excited about reading. So it should be a spontaneous thing, just picking up books and reading them for enjoyment, for school, all of it. And don't give them any disabling distractions, which the Robinson curriculum talks about. TV, right? Be careful with those disabling distractions. This is why they say no screens, no computers for kids under the age of 16 or anything like that. Just books. Focus on providing great quality literature and ample time for them to just sit there and read. Again, it should be a spontaneous thing, and don't give them disabling distractions. Another don't from the course of study is don't let them read material not suited for children. Don't even have it in your home. And even material that you think is fine for older children to read, be careful not to let younger kids that can really let their imaginations run wild and they really can kind of dwell on some things. An example of this is the Chronicles of Narnia. Even though these are books that the RC list gives you as additional reading that you can print off, you can read, he tells you be mindful, be wary that maybe this is not something that you want to give younger children that are very impressionable and can kind of dwell on some of these things. So even books that you think you would let older children read or you think they're fine, there's nothing bad, they might not be suitable for young children. So keep that in mind. Another don't is don't worry about the rate of progress as they go down this list. As long as they're reading high quality materials, don't worry about it because it changes. Just because they maybe start off or they hit a patch and they're reading books slow, it might take them weeks or a month to finish a book. You don't know. Later on, their speed will increase and then they're just tearing through that book list. So it's okay, let them go at their own speed. It's okay if they progress slowly. Realize that the pace changes as they get older. Now, the RC book list gives you in the additional reading section a lot of extra fun, just adventure books for kids. And again, this is meant to kind of get them excited about the book list. Yes, they are books that are maybe over 100 years old, but they contain great vocabulary, great moral stories, and again, very little pictures so that it engages their imagination. So do use these children adventure books for the non-academic recreational time of the day for additional reading. Do encourage a love of books and reading. And yes, one of the best ways to do that is leading by example. They have to see you sit down and read books as well. I totally advocate for reading aloud to the kids, but they also have to see you reading books just for you, for yourself. And so I highly recommend this during the RC reading time. Everybody sit on the couch and read a book, including you. And yes, even if it sounds really difficult, you have a million things to do, 15 minutes. Just sit down for the first 15 minutes as they all get adjusted and you grab a book and just set that example as well. I have found that it's funny, even my 4-year-old who doesn't know how to read yet, when we're all sitting down and reading, myself included, she grabs books as well and just sits on the couch and is looking through them. It's a good form of peer pressure, right? So I highly encourage for you to sit down with them during that reading time, even if it's just for a portion, but you sit down and read as well. And I'm not talking about on your phone, being on your phone. I don't think it's fair because they don't know what you're doing on your phone. You could be reading your Bible, you could be reading a book on your phone, but again, it's not the same as them seeing you open the Bible, seeing you open a book and you're reading as well. So I think it's best to just go that route. Let them see you reading a book as well. Do allow your children to have substantial digressions. And what I mean by that is just getting on a kick. For example, the RC course of study had the example of one of his sons that got on this Mark Twain kick and read everything that Mark Twain had ever written. So I'm sure it kind of paused the book list and he just went off and read everything. And that was okay. And then he came back and read through the rest of the library of the list. But he talks about how this has a lot of advantages. It's okay because they not just read the books, but they also kind of get into the psyche of the person. They learn about their philosophy and their values, and so it goes on a lot deeper. And so the education in that instance goes a lot deeper than just kind of a surface reading their books. They really get to know the authors, and that has a lot of benefits. So it's okay that they have these digressions. do realize, please note that the list does have a couple of biases, and I'm going to explain those to you right now. Number one is a freedom and free market bias, which totally agree with. That's why I also love the Tuttle Twin books, and I've made videos on that. Number two is the study of history by the people who made the history versus historians who write about it. Okay, so for example, you will find on the RC book list a lot of autobiographical works. It's always going to lean towards reading the accounts of those that lived through it, that created the history, versus a textbook written by some, modern college graduate, writing about it back then. So it's always going to put an emphasis and bias on the people who actually made the history. And that's actually something that I really appreciate from the book list. It is recommended that you do read the books as printed text and that you don't read them on an electronic format. Now, I know that could be a little controversial today, and for some parents, it's a make it or break it kind of thing where the only way they can do this curriculum is if they can just make that step really easy and have all the books on an e-reader. I totally get that. The only reason why the RC Course of Study says, stay off the screens is because it's just known, especially with young children, to lower reading comprehension. And also it can lower the speed at which they read. So those are a couple things, you just have to keep in mind. The more ideal options would be to have the book in print, whether that's buying the book, which today we have so many reprints available on Amazon at an extremely affordable price, as well as other websites like abooks.com, where you can get the older books really cheap, or finding them in your library. That's a little bit more uncommon today, but sometimes you can do that, or printing them. Obviously, when you purchase the RC curriculum, you have all the text files so that you can print and bind your own books at home. All right, so that's it when it comes to the RC course of study. Really simple, right? Do read the list. Don't provide disabling distractions for the most part. That's pretty much the gist of it. But I do want to add a few little things, just my own opinion, my own 2 cents. This is not RC course of study, because I do get these questions a lot. One question that I hear a lot when it comes to coaching calls and things like that is, what if you have your child and you're transitioning over to RC, maybe they're 12, 13, 14, where do you start on the book list? And there's a video that I've done on that. You can gauge it by maybe 100 words on the page or by the vocabulary, but that's not the question, that's not what I'm really focusing on. It's the desire that they have to hit up some of the great classics in the earlier part of the list. But they're at a point where they're older, they really should be, at a different part of the list. So how can you balance that? Keep in mind that a big chunk of the first page of the first couple of years when it comes to reading, it's a lot of children adventure books, right? To get them excited. However, mixed in there is also some great history books. So I go into it in more detail in my homeschooling course that's coming out later, Sustainable Homeschooling 101. I really go deep into my method for making sure you kind of pick those books out, and if you're transitioning later, how to balance it all in. So I'll just give you a little nutshell here. You want to go through the list and you can just kind of cross out all those fun adventure type books like the Rover Boys, the Bobbsey Twins. However, highlight a couple that you feel there's really a lot of value there, even for older kids, that they would enjoy it. For example, book number 45, Just So Stories. I would not skip that one. If I could, I would work that into the additional recreational reading time of that older child. And also, for example, the Christopher Columbus and the Discovery of the New World by Josephine Pollard. That would be another one. I would not worry about, though, book number 4, The Life of George Washington, because they are going to read a lot of George Washington books later on the list. So don't worry about that. That's something that you can just skip. If they're older, it's okay. They're going to cover it. Another question that I get often is, do they have to read every single book? What if I don't like a particular author? then yeah, it's okay. You know, feel comfortable with what you're giving your kids. Obviously, cross it out. You can substitute it with something else. You know, it's totally up to you. But this is the general guide. You don't want to stray too much because there's a method to this, right? You have language arts, science, literature, world history, American history, social studies. So you don't want to tamper too much with the list. But yeah, there's a couple authors in here that I'm not a fan of, and I just cross them out. You can just substitute it with something else, but make sure it's on that same comparable quality. All right, that's it for this video. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. That concludes the do's and don'ts series when it comes to the Robinson curriculum, unless you can think of kind of something else, maybe the do's and don'ts of study environments. You know, we can take it a step further and do videos like that. If you're interested in that, let me know in the comments below. All right, thank you so much. And if you'd like to check out that playlist with the other do's and don'ts, I will link it in a card also. All right, talk to you soon. Bye.